So hello, everyone. Welcome. The return of the SFPHP Meetup group. I'm Chris Boudreau, one of the organizers at SFPHP. Welcome. I work here at BabyCenter. Those of you who work here, can you raise your hands so everyone in the audience sees? If you want to know about BabyCenter, ask us what it is working here. BabyCenter is a website that's been around. It was one of the original .com startups founded in 1997 in this, I don't know if in this exact building, but definitely in this neighborhood. It's been around, so 2017 will mark 20 years it's been around. Changed hands a few times. We're now owned by Johnson & Johnson. So we're a Johnson & Johnson company. And what we do is we offer information to parents. We reach 45 million parents a month worldwide. And besides the U.S., where we reach 8 out of 10 new and expecting parents, we are in 11 different countries with information about what to expect when you're pregnant and what to expect each week of development of your baby. So I run the PHP team at BabyCenter. We work on the community sites, the US and UK community sites, and the WordPress sites. So we're very deep into PHP. So we're very excited to be the host of this PHP meetup. I think next I'll be passing it on to Fred. Oh, you want to speak? Okay, great.
Hi, my name is André. I'm also one of the organizers here, and I'm doing a personal plea. Does anybody here know PHP? Yeah, a little bit. We really need, so you can see this is not a hostile group of people, right? It's all pretty friendly people, laid back. We need you to please volunteer to speak. We need anything you want to talk about that's related to general PHP, libraries, tools, if vendors that you like or work with, really anything. It can be a short talk, 2 to 3 minutes. It can be a longer talk. But we really want to get this back up and going and have it be once a month. So we don't have anybody for next month yet. So if this is something that you could consider interesting, or if you know someone who you'd like to push into doing this, you can contact us through the Meetup group at any time. So thanks very much. And I will pass the mic over to one of our sponsors who they provided generously the food and drink. So thank you to Platform.
All right, thank you for the introduction. Before I go too far through all the introductions, if anybody was fortunate enough to get one of the bottle openers that we had, be a pal to somebody nearby and open their beer, okay? So, yeah, my name is Aaron Porter. I'm with a company called platform.sh. This is actually my colleague and boss, Fred, so I have to make a good impression tonight. So everybody laugh when I make jokes, okay? We actually we were invited to come along and be sponsors for this, and we actually both recently moved out here to San Francisco Bay Area to start promoting our company, Platform.sh, here and building up our company in the United States. So this is our first sort of outreach here locally, and we're really thankful and we have a lot of gratitude for being able to come here. It's our understanding this is maybe the first meeting in about a year or so, and we really look forward to being active and being part of future meetings. So thank you all for coming out and listening to us talk. We have a great speaker for you tonight. Before I introduce him, though, I'm sure everybody knows who it is, but I'm not going to say his name yet. I'm not going to give you a full commercial of Platform.sh. I'm sure nobody came here for a commercial, but I think a nice 30,000-foot overview of who we are and what we do is relevant, and it might be interesting for you. So Platform.sh is a second-generation platform as a service and cloud hosting company. We cut our teeth in the Drupal CMS world and the Drupal community, which is PHP-based. And we were actually part of another company at that time called Commerce Guys. We developed the product line, and we started expanding. So a very short recap just for this year, 2016. In February, we became an independent company from Commerce Guys. In April, we became the cloud backend solution for Magento. In July, we signed an agreement with Microsoft in Germany for Azure to actually help with the adoption of their infrastructure by putting our platform on top of that. Oh, I skipped one. In February, there was also a telco called Orange, which is a very large telco and infrastructure as a service provider. That really kicked things off for us. They did the same thing. They put our platform on top of their infrastructure to increase the adoption. So back to July, we were at Microsoft. This month, we actually just signed an agreement with Easy Publish, so it's another PHP-based framework, to be their cloud backend provider. And we're also very good friends with Fabien, so we get to say that we're the chosen cloud platform for Symfony-based models as well. So this year, we're really capturing a lot of the PHP market, and we're looking to expand our offering. As I said, we cut our teeth in Drupal. That let us know that we could create technology and a tool set that PHP users and developers could use to make their lives easier and better. So now we natively support most PHP frameworks out of the box. We also have in production Node.js, and we're in beta for Ruby and Python. So with that said, the one shameless plug I have to give here, in about 2 weeks, we will have the largest free Drupal event in the world right here in, actually it's going to be in Berkeley. It's at the UC Berkeley campus. It's called Bad Camp. There will be about 1,800 attendees there. So if you guys want to check out Drupal and do some PHP with some Drupal folks, it's free and it's content-driven. It's a great, great camp. So with that said, you won't have to listen to me anymore. I'd like to introduce Fabien Pontencier. I'm not going to say it anywhere near the way it sounds. So Pontencier, he is the founder and creator of Symfony. He's the CEO of Sensio Labs. He's also the CEO of Blackfire.io. And with that said, here's Fabien. Thank you, guys.
So actually, this is the first time I'm going to talk at a PHP meetup, at a meetup in San Francisco without any jet lag. First time, because I live here in San Francisco now. I've moved in with my family 2 months ago, and you know, everything is going really great for now. And so, what about the PHP community here? And I must say that, you know, there is one thing that bothers me a lot in San Francisco. It's not about you. It's not about the PHP community. And actually, I'm really happy to see so many people tonight. It's about, you know, you talk with a company and they tell you that they are using this great JavaScript framework, right? And all of a sudden, everyone is using this XYZ framework, and it's you know, everyone is using it. It's great, and probably in 2 months from now, it's going to be another one, but nobody cares. If someone is using PHP, he is not going to tell you that he is using PHP, and I don't understand why. We should be proud of PHP, right? It's a boring technology for sure, but it's stable, it's mature, and we are doing great things with PHP actually. So the hype here is you know, kind of annoying really. And the thing is, I think PHP7 is really a good step in the direction of making PHP relevant for the next 10 or 20 years. I don't want PHP to become the next Boudreau. You know. Okay, so, and one thing that is really great in the PHP community is the fact that we don't break backward compatibility so much. Not anymore. We have great tools, Composer, Drupal, WordPress, Symfony. And we are all using semantic versioning, which means that we don't break backward compatibility if we don't need to. And if we need to, we then switch to a major new version. And recently, PHP has been doing the exact same thing, right? Which means that upgrading from PHP 5.4 to 5.5, for instance, should be easy. And the same goes between 5.5 and 5.6. And we will see that the same goes also for PHP7. That doesn't work. Anyone using PHP4? PHP 5.0, 5.1? No, you can't use this version anyway. They did not work. They never worked, really. PHP 5.2, perhaps? Yes, there is a yes, sorry. It's not you. There is one PHP 5 here in the audience using PHP 5.2 in production. It's dead 6 years. 5.3, I'm sure there are some people using 5.3, not just one. I'm sure there are more than that. No? Thank you. It's dead 2 years ago. 5.4. Really? Or you're not using PHP. That's why. Okay. 5.5. It's a very recent version, right? Yes. A lot of people are using 5.5 in production. It's dead. 2 months ago. It's not supported anymore, right? You can have, security patches on PHP 5.5, but it's not supported anymore. So if you have a bug, you need to upgrade.
So someone got on the phone. Thank you.
And so the thing is, PHP moves really fast. And by the way, I have a lot of websites on PHP 5.5 myself and 5.6. And the thing is, PHP moves really fast nowadays, which means
your line has been muted.
It's kind of annoying to have to actually upgrade every 6 months or every year. But the good news is that you can do that because PHP does not break backward compatibility anymore. So that's something that you can do. By the way, you can go on those pages to know more about supported versions of PHP. And 7.0 is already old news because in about a month, 7.1 is going to be out with some good new features. I'm going to talk about some of them. So PHP 5.6, PHP 7, there is one missing in the middle, PHP 6. You know why? Yes? Don't care. We don't care. So after PHP 5, the core team, they decided to talk about PHP 6 in Paris, France. Probably a bad idea. They, had too much wine. And they decided to add Unicode to PHP. So they started to work on that. It was really a nightmare because it's a complex task, especially if you want to maintain backward compatibility, and that was the goal. And at some point, they decided to give up because it was just slow and very complex to actually finish, and nobody wanted to finish that work. So at some point, I decided to give it on PHP 6, but PHP 6 was not just about Unicode, it was also about other new features like namespaces, anonymous functions, and things like that. So they decided to remove the Unicode part and release PHP 5.3, right? So PHP 5.3, this is really just PHP 6 minus the Unicode support that never happened. What about PHP 7? And by the way, PHP 6 was really a bad idea, right? Because of Perl 6. Yeah, Perl? Yeah, Perl 6. That's also why I won't have Symfony 6 or Twig 6 or Swiftner 6. Don't use 6 as a number in your code. So PHP 7 is PHP 5.6 plus speed, less memory, and some features we don't really care about, but still no Unicode. So today I'm not going to give you a long list of features added in PHP 7 because that doesn't make any sense and it's kind of boring and you're going to sleep. You can go online. There are a lot of slides on speaker deck, for instance. There are some books on PHP7, and you can, get all the boring stuff. So today I want to focus on things that I think really matters for PHP7. And the first one is this one: no big CC break. Especially if your code is clean, or whatever it means. So let me give you some examples. This one is really complex. Okay. So do you know that in PHP, you can have variable. I'm not sure how it's called, variable or something like that? Yeah. How many of you have ever used that kind of syntax? Really? Okay. I don't even understand why you would want to do that, but anyway. So the problem here is, how do you evaluate this expression, right? There is two ways. The first one is you first evaluate $foo, and you get the bar item and then the buzz item, and then on the result, you get the variable for that string, first possibility. The other one is you first evaluate $foo, and then you get the bar item on that, and then the buzz item. Okay, do you know which one is used by PHP? The first one, okay? We think this is the first one. We think this is the second one. We think it depends. Actually, it depends. So it's not the same in PHP5 and PHP7. Or perhaps this is the same. I don't remember. I don't care. Okay, so if you want to use this syntax, then you can put parentheses, right? To be sure that you know what you want to express, right? And the same goes for the second one. You can evaluate left, right, or right, left. And again, I think this one is different between PHP5 and 7. The good news is that in PHP7, it's consistent. So it's always evaluated from left to right. So left first, and then you go to the right. Okay. This is valid on PHP5. The first one is not in PHP7. And we don't care. This is a BC break, right? But who wants to write the first line? Doesn't mean anything. So you can just remove the line, and then bam, you're compatible with PHP7. Good. This one, this is valid in PHP5. So you have two default switch cases. Doesn't make any sense. It's not supported anymore in PHP7. So just fix the code, because the first one is not evaluated anyway. So it's not. It's dead code anyway. And I can go on and on and on. And all the BC breaks, all the major BC breaks in PHP7 are examples like that. You want to add two numbers, but you add one with whatever. It works in PHP5. You have a warning, of course, but it works. It returns 1. Doesn't make any sense. It's not supported anymore in PHP7. I like this one. I did not know before working on this presentation, but you can, in PHP5, have two variables with the same name. That works. And you get the second value. It's not supported anymore in PHP7. This one is interesting. So this is a special variable in PHP, right? This is the current object in PHP. But the thing is, before PHP7 and even for PHP7.1, this is very interesting because you can do a lot of things with this. You can reassign the value of this. For instance, that works. This works. That doesn't make any sense, right? Who would want to do this? It works. It doesn't work anymore in PHP7, and that's a good thing because, using this, it breaks, object-oriented programming big ways. So that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work anymore. Okay, I'm going to switch to the next one because this one is very interesting. We don't have magic quotes anymore in PHP7. Yeah. It took 10 years. Do I need to talk about this one? Filter input, escape output, or is it clear for everyone? Clear for everyone? Type 1. Yeah, okay. Okay. Never, ever trust user input. Never, ever trust user input. Never. It means that whenever you are using something coming from the user, you need to do something about it. And it depends on the context. So let's say that you have a form, and the user can enter a username and a password, a login form, for instance. You have the username. The first thing you want to do is to actually filter the input. And filtering means that the username should only contain letters and numbers, for instance, and a dot or something like that. It should not be more than 20 characters, whatever. That's the filtering of the input. And then you are going to use the username and the password somewhere. You can display the username in an HTML page, for instance, and you need to escape the username so that if it contains a character that is a valid, opening tag, for instance, you need to escape that so that it displays correctly in the browser. So that's what we call output escaping, because it is escape based on the context of the output, right? And even in HTML, the context can be different from HTML. If you are using username in a JavaScript section, the escaping mechanism is going to be totally different from escaping the username in a CSS section or an HTML section or an HTML attribute. Depending on the context, the rules are not the same, right? And of course, if you are going to use username and password in a SQL statement, then again, the rule to actually escape is going to be different. So if you are not escaping a password, for instance, you can have a SQL injection. So let's say that instead of giving my password, I give quote or 1 = 1, something like that. If I do not escape the password here, it's going to be evaluated to select ID from user where username equals username and password quote or 1 = 1. So basically, I'm able to bypass the password check, which means that using this magic password, I can log in as an admin, for instance, right? So first, use prepared statements. Done. But in PHP 15 years ago, they wanted to prevent those kind of things because, SQL injections are a big problem in any language on the web. It was a big problem back then. So they invented magic quotes. It's magic because by default, if it is enabled in PHP.ini, by default, it's going to add a / before the quote. On the input, that's bad. It's really bad. You should not escape the input and the magic quote behavior is exactly that. It is about escaping the input instead of escaping the output. First problem. Right? The second problem of magic quote is that adding a / it worked in old version of MySQL. It was not standard, which means that it does not work for PostgreSQL, for instance. And I think, I'm not a MySQL user, but I think it does not work anymore in recent versions of MySQL, especially in the strict mode, yes, because again, it's not standard, which means that it gives you a false sense of security, right? So if you were using PostgreSQL or a recent version of MySQL, it did not work at all. It also means that if now I want to use the password or the username in an HTML context, I have a /. I don't need a / before the quote. So that doesn't work. And the fact that it was part of PHP.ini, as a developer, you had to check if it was enabled or not. So most of the frameworks back then, they unescape by default if it was enabled, because you can't, manage two different values depending on a setting in PHP.ini. So it's gone, and it's good. So remember, you need to filter the input and escape the output. And the thing is, it took 10 years because of backward compatibility. So PHP does care about that a lot. That's a good news. That's a great feature of PHP7. I'm going to talk about type inting and PHP docs. I don't like PHP docs. That's why it is light gray, so you can't read anything on the screen. So here I have a class foo, I have a construct, and I have a very useful PHP docs. It says that this is a constructor. Wow, that's a great news. I didn't know. No value, right? And then there is param bar, which is exactly the same as bar. So I don't need that information. And the fact that I am actually duplicating the information is really annoying, because if you are changing one of them, you need to remember to change the other one. If not, your IDE might, go crazy with it. And the same goes for the second one. Get foobar, get a foobar, and return foobar. This one is interesting because there is no way I can, this one is really easy to understand because I return a new foobar, but let's say that there is some more code in there. This one is interesting. And the thing is, I think it's not really readable anymore. I have a bunch of signs everywhere, and it's not readable anymore. You can simplify that a lot in PHP7 because, so in PHP5, you can type in int with array and a class. That's all. As of PHP7, you can also type int with a scalar type, int, integer, boolean, what else? String. Yeah, string. I think that's all. Which means that everything you need to know about the method is actually there in the signature, which is a good thing. So PHP knows about your intent, your ID as well, everyone. That's great. And you can also say that the get foobar method returns a foobar instance. And of course, this is an information used by PHP to check at runtime that you are actually returning a foobar instance. If not, then you have an error. That's the next slide. Thank you. No, yeah. Oh, just before that, you can't do that in PHP7. So you still need PHP docs when you are returning an array of objects and you want to add the type of the values in the array. No. So when my function takes an x can be null. You can say equal null, right? And then PHP accepts integers or null. But the thing is, equal null means also that null is the default value, which means that x is not required. So you can just call f without anything, and it's going to receive x. That's a problem because sometimes you want to accept null, but the argument is actually required. And that's the goal of the question mark here. The question mark means that the value is actually required, but it can be an integer or null, right? So if you want the default value to be null, you can also add equal null here. It's not the same as the question mark in front of type int. This is only available as of 7.1, not 7.0. This one is interesting. So PHP7, the engine is totally different. And one of the big changes is about errors. So instead of fatal errors, sometimes PHP now throws an error exception. So for instance, if you are trying to call a method that does not exist on an object, now you're getting an error exception instead of a fatal error, which means that you can catch the exception and you can do something about it. Right? Most of the errors are now exceptions. And of course, to be backward compatible, error cannot extend exception, because if you are catching all exceptions, all of a sudden you are getting new exceptions for PHP syntax problems. So PHP7 introduces a new interface, throwable, and error implements throwable and exception as well. So two different hierarchies of exception. One for errors and the other one for real exceptions, like parse errors and type errors as well and things like that. So you have exceptions that you can catch and you can manage them if you want. That's all. Everything else is not interesting at all. Or you can use them, but it's not that interesting. And that's a good thing, really. I don't think that we need more features in PHP, in the core of PHP. At some point, you know, the language is useful as it is, and you don't need more things. So for instance, in PHP7, you have anonymous classes. Okay, why not? I don't care. So the great new feature of PHP7 is speed, speed, speed. It is twice as fast on average, of course, compared to PHP5.6. And you know that PHP5.6 is faster than 5.5, and 5.5 is faster than 5.4, and then you get the point. And it uses half the memory. And of course, there is a correlation between the memory and the speed. So we wouldn't want to upgrade to the newest version of PHP, which gives you a performance boost for free without BC breaks. So that's the biggest feature of PHP7, and that's about all the changes under the hood. And we don't really care about them and how that works or whatever. The result is that PHP is much faster than it was before. And it's not really about the userland improvement. And that's also because everyone knows about HHVM, Facebook, yes. And we have a faster PHP because of Facebook. Because at some point they decided to switch to something else. So they re-implemented a runtime engine for PHP, that's HHVM and EPUB before. It was much faster than PHP5, so some big companies started to migrate from PHP to HHVM and then decided to do something about it. And that's PHP-NG, which is now called PHP7. So that's great. Competition is always a good thing. Which also means that nowadays, less and less companies are actually switching to HHVM because you can get the same kind of performance with PHP7 without any issue or compatibility issues between PHP7 and HHVM. So we have a new engine, blah, 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 don't care. I want to talk about one small thing. It's not small, actually. It's about the fact that PHP7 makes your composer-based apps much faster. Not just because of PHP7, because of something else, and that's arrays as constant. And just to illustrate that, one small change in language, you will see that it's really small, allows the community to actually improve the performance of what we have and our tools very easily. So you all know that autoloading is slow in PHP. So autoloading is the process where PHP actually needs to figure out the file it needs to load in memory based on the class name. So you have a class name, and you need to figure out which file you need to actually load from the file system. It is slow because in many applications nowadays, you are using a framework or a CMS, and they are loading a lot of classes, a lot. hundreds of them. So this process is kind of slow, if doesn't really scale. And so Composer is slow as well because, well, it's using the mechanism from PHP. So I'm going to switch to here. So this is Blackfire.io. This is a Symfony web app with a bunch of dependencies. So I'm going to remove my vendor Composer directory. I'm going to install the, okay, it should be fast. And you can see that I have a bunch of dependencies, right? Symfony, Doctrine, Guzzle, and a bunch of other ones. All those dependencies, they are doing great things. We don't have any small dependencies like in a JavaScript, well-known Node.js, NPM thing, and we're not going to talk about that today. Anyway, we don't have this problem. We have great libraries in the PHP world. Okay, we have so many of them. Okay. Yeah, React. That's a lot. So you can imagine that on average, on any page on Blackfire.io, we actually load 400 different classes, right? And the problem in PHP, and that's why PHP is great, it's the fact that at the end of each web request, PHP throws everything away. It trashes everything. So for every single request, it starts from scratch. So it knows nothing about the last request, which means that loading the 400 files must be done again and again and again, right? Which is kind of slow. That's also why PHP is great as a platform, right? Do you like PHP as a language? I don't. I do like PHP as a platform. As a language, not so much. I mean, it's much better than it was a few years back. So I'm going to show you what's going on here. So perhaps I can show you vendor.php, which is the file that you need to include in your code. It's very easy. So we require another file, and we return something get loader. So let's have a look at this file. The real autoloader is here. We get the loader. It does some magic to load the class loader class because we don't have an autoloader to load the autoloader. And then there is one thing here. If we are on PHP 5.6 or 7, then we are using a static loader. If not, we are using these types. This is really slow. This is slow because for every single class, we need to have a look at, let's see, PS4, for instance. So, interesting. You can't see my screen. Why? Oh, it is very slow. Here we go. So you can see that for every namespace, I have an array of classes, right? So every time I'm loading a class, Composer needs to figure out what the namespace is, and then it can get the path. And as you can see here, it's a dynamic one. $vendor here, which is defined before over there, right? So that's kind of slow if you do that for more than 100 different classes. So let's have a look at the static autoloader. So I'm going to, as you can see here, we have a bunch of static property on the class, and at the end we have. I'm not going to talk about this. This is kind of an optimization anyway. And here you can see loader class map, and we just assign this class map from the current class, which is this array. We don't have that many classes here. Do you know why I do have those classes here? That's the one you reference directly in composer.json. Right, so if I'm going back to composer.json, okay, you can see that here I have class map, so I have a PHP7 regular one. So anything coming from the BlackFire namespace is stored under this directory. And then for those special classes, there is a class map, right? So basically, the app kernel class is in this class, and there is no namespace, so there is no way to actually do PSR0 or PSR4. And it is interesting to have the class map because if we have a look at the class loader class, so whenever you autoload a class, this load class method is called with the class, and the only thing it does is calling the find file method with the class. We get a file, we include the file, and done. Here, so the first, you can ignore the first 2 lines. I've actually submitted a pull request today to remove those 2 lines because it's a workaround for a bug before 5.3.2, which is not supported by Composer anyway. So it's not that interesting. And then you can see if is set in the class map, we return that. So it's really fast. If it is not in the class map, which is the case for most of the classes, then we need to find the file with extension, and we have a lot of logic trying to figure out where the file is. So we are doing a bunch of file exits and things like that. That's quite kind of complex. So we want to avoid that. And you can avoid that by running composer dump autoload optimize this command. So basically, when I'm doing that, we don't care about those. Basically, what Composer just did, and I'm not sure why this is not default. If we have a look at the class map, now I have a bunch of files here. Oh, you can't see the scrolling. Okay. So you will see in a minute that we have 8,000 lines in there. 8,000. That's a lot. That's a big array, right? It is much faster just because if you want to load this class, it's here. Done. Really fast, right? But it is even faster in 5.6 and 7.0, and here's why. Probably have slide on that. Yeah. So that's because of some changes in 5.6 and 7. So the first one is, so whenever you start a new process to handle a web request, you are going to load some classes. And whenever you add dependencies in your code and you redump the autoloader, you're going to have a growing array. It's going to take more and more time to actually load that into memory, right? Because for every single request, PHP has to parse the file, execute the file, and store that in memory. So it takes some memory. Even if you are using opcache, because it can save you from, generating the opcode, but it still needs to execute the opcode to actually construct the array in memory, right? One big difference in PHP 5.6 is that you can have arrays as constants. And to better understand that, I'm going to switch to this. So if I have a constant, let's say foo equals foo, and let's evaluate that on all versions, you will see that it works for all versions of PHP and HHVM. Now, let's try to do something a bit different, like this. The concatenation of foo and bar. Is it dynamic? Not really, because we are trying to concatenate two strings. So at compilation time, PHP knows that the result is actually foo bar. We don't need to do that at runtime, right? So as of PHP, okay, it doesn't work in PHP 4. Okay, so if I execute that, you will see that it doesn't work. It works in PHP 5.6, HHVM 7, and of course, it doesn't work on PHP 5, but I forgot it here. You will see it doesn't work in PHP 5.5, right? It's unexpected because before 5.6, a constant can only be a scalar. So a string, a boolean, an integer, that's all. As of 5.6, this is resolved at compilation time, right? So doing this or that is exactly the same, right? So you might think that it's not that interesting, but now if I'm doing that or something like that, you can imagine that it is much more interesting. It is still static. At compilation time, I can resolve underscore, underscore, dear, underscore, underscore. And again, it works in PHP 5.6, not before. You can even do that. Array. It works because it is still static. And then here, it doesn't work with HHVM. So it's only 5.6 and 7. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Or we can just have a look at the composer thing. And you can see that here, this is exactly what we have. Underscore, underscore, dear, then we concatenate with a string, then we concatenate with another string, which means that PHP can actually create a constant array out of this big array. In PHP 7, it's even better because, and actually that's not PHP 7, that's upcached in PHP 7. There is an optimization, and this optimization is all about being able to actually share that array between processes. Yeah? Let me give you an example. So that's what it's called immutable arrays in upcache. So let's say that, okay, I need to copy and paste something, and it's going to be much faster that way. Okay, so here, what do we have? We have an array, it's empty. I iterate a large number of times, and I'm adding this static array, right? Let's see if we execute that. Let's see how it goes. So it works in all versions of PHP, of course. No question about that. But let's have a look at the performance tab and the memory. I don't really care about the CPU numbers. You can see that it takes 45 megabytes on PHP 5.4, 5.5, and 5.6, 27 in 7, and that's because the engine is much more efficient. The data structures have been optimized. That's why it consumes half of the memory, but you can see that in 7.1, it's even less, 20. That's because PHP only stores this array once, and then it reuses this array, so you only have pointers in the main array. So, and I can demonstrate that really easily. If I'm adding some more numbers, you will see that still the same. But then here it's much bigger. and here as well, right? And so the thing is, by default, it is able to reuse the exact same array. But what if I want to change one of the numbers in there? So let's try that. So here, I'm going to change a random one to whatever. So here, out of the 10,000 arrays, I'm modifying just one value. If I do that, PHP is going to copy the array to be able to modify it just for this line. So it does not have any impact on the other ones, which means that the memory usage should be almost the same, right? It is a bit more than before, but not that much. Now, if I'm doing the same thing, but I'm changing all of them, just one number, and if I'm doing the same thing, what is the result? You're sleeping. I'm the only one working here. The memory is exactly the same in PHP7 and 7.1. Of course, because now PHP must duplicate the array because there is one difference for each one of them, right? Okay. So that's a yes. Okay, and that's why, and this example is only in one process, but it also works if you have several processes, because it's stored in shared memory. Okay, so we did some benchmark, and for Blackfire, where we have, I don't remember, 8,000 lines of classes in the array, and we are logging something like 400 classes for any request, we have a performance difference of 10%. And we are consuming 30% less memory. That's on top of the performance boost coming from PHP7. So that's very interesting. If you want to know more about that, there are a few links here. I'm going to copy-paste them on the Meetup as a comment. This one is about immutable arrays. This one is about how we actually set up Composer. This is a pull request. This is how you can dig into all the options to optimize your autoloader class map. So do that. If you're not doing the Composer dump autoload optimize, you won't benefit from what I've just talked about. Oh, by the way, I lied about Unicode. There is one tiny improvement in PHP7 related to Unicode, and that's the possibility to actually, so there is one new escape sequence where you can put a Unicode code point if you want to reference one in your code. So that doesn't work in PHP5, it does work in PHP7. It is useful sometimes, so I wanted to mention that. Okay, I think that's all for today. Again, there are other new features in PHP7. I don't think they are that interesting. If you are interested in learning more about PHP7, again, there are quite a few resources on the web about that. And yesterday, Sebastian Bergman and a few other people actually released a new book on PHP7. We can I think it's, I got it. I think it's 10, no, I think it's more expensive than that, 20 or something like that. It's a 200 pages book on PHP7. So there are a lot of details about BC breaks, new features. So if you want to upgrade to PHP7, it might be interesting to actually read the book to really understand where you need to have a look in your code base to be sure that you are compatible with PHP7. But I'm sure that you have a lot of tests, so you don't care because your tests are going to tell you where you need to actually fix things. Of course. Thank you very much.
Test. Excellent. Thank you so much, Fabien. That's great. We can do some questions. We could do some questions here in the audience, pass the mics around, and then we might go to people dialed in on the phone if they have any questions. So anyone have any questions? Yes.
I was just wondering if you had an opinion on Flanger.
.NET.
Yes, it compiles PHP to JIT.
I never used that, so I don't know.
Okay.
Is it still alive? Because
still alive. They're still working on it.
That's a quite old project, right?
It's an old project, but they're continuing improvements on it.
I can't tell you. I don't know. The thing is, I'm not sure if there are so many people using it. Sorry. I never ever had a bug report on that technology. So I have a bunch on HHVM, that's for sure. So I'm not sure. I think it's not used in production anywhere. Are you using it? No.
Libraries. We were like doing libraries that were in .NET, and then we were using web services to talk to our PHP app to like do things. But the Flanger allows you to basically call your .NET application, your .NET code directly in PHP.
Yeah.
So
it
was
makes
kind of
sense if you have a lot of libraries written in .NET or C# or whatever. Yeah, that makes sense. So the thing is, the problem is that PHP is a moving target, right? They are adding new features and new syntaxes all the time, fixing bugs. And the biggest problem with PHP is that there is no specification. There was no specification. There is a specification now, but it's brand new. It has been written by Facebook 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years ago perhaps. So now we have a specification. But before, the PHP specification was actually the implementation by the PHP4 team, right? Which means that there are a lot of edge cases. I've talked about some of them today, which means that trying to re-implement PHP with all the edge cases, this is really a nightmare. So that's also why having the specification and 2 different implementations, big implementations, PHP and HHVM, is really a good thing for PHP, because now we do have a specification that you can read and understand how PHP is supposed to work. If it is not that way, it's a bug. Before, it was not a bug, it was a specification. So.
Thank you for the presentation. I actually have 2 questions. Well, first of all, congratulations on your move to San Francisco.
Thank you.
Does that mean that Sensor Lab is hiring now here?
Yes.
That was the question number 1. And the second is, so you mentioned that you don't really like PHP docs. What about like semantics of the variables, like other descriptions, like apart from types and stuff? How can you elaborate on that, please?
Okay. So I don't like useless PHP docs. And most projects, including Symfony, I don't know, but perhaps 80% of all the PHP docs that we have are useless.
It does a really good job of documentation.
Yes. So, yeah, Drupal is a very good project in this regard. So whenever they add PHP docs, it's really about documenting something. It's about explaining how things work, and it's great. But if you are using PHP docs just because of a quality tool that tells you that it's great to have PHP docs, then it does not make sense. And the same goes for code coverage, right? Trying to get 100% code coverage on your code is stupid. Doesn't make any sense, right? So for simple methods where the method name is explicit enough, if it is just a getter or a constructor or whatever, you don't need to describe what it does, right? If it is about describing how it works, or if there are some edge cases that you are taking care of in the method or things like that, then of course this is useful. But just adding param and then the variable name and then the class name, it doesn't add anything useful. And it uses some memory. Yeah, because PHP needs to actually load those commands. And then, and that's interesting, because if you are using reflection, you can get the command, which means that the command is actually stored in memory, right? That's why 3 or 4 years ago, Drupal opened a ticket on Symfony saying, okay, we want to add more documentation in the code for Symfony. That's what we are doing with Drupal, and that's great. And I say, no, that's not how it works in Symfony. We have a documentation project which is totally separate, where we actually explain those things, because it adds some overhead to have those things directly in the files. It is significant. Yes, but if you want to use annotation, let's get started on it. Come on. The reality is that if you want to use annotation nowadays, you need to use PHP docs, which means that you can't remove the command from, and you can't say, okay, on this class, please keep the PHP docs, and on that class, no, I want, that doesn't work. But yes, if you are not using annotations, then you can say that you don't want them in production, for instance. So.
I just want to hear what you had to say about annotations.
You know, I'm a bit jet-lagged right now. I like annotation. And frankly, I don't care if we are using commands to actually make annotations possible in PHP. It would be better if it was part of the language, but it's not. So the only way to make them work is to actually put them in commands. It's weird at the beginning, but after some time, you don't even realize that it's all about commands anymore. But I do like annotations. Especially because, you know, in a project like Symfony, you have many ways to actually configure things. But what I like about annotations, and I'm talking about annotations in controllers. You have a controller, and if you are using Symfony annotations, you can have the route just there, and you can have all the information at the same place, right? If not, you have the controller. If you want to figure out the route, you need to open another file, which is elsewhere, which is kind of annoying. So if you can have everything in one file, that's better, I think. And the same goes with Doctrine. If you want to have the mapping, you can do that with an XML file or YAML file or whatever you want. But if you have annotations, then you can understand everything in one file. You have the annotation for Doctrine, you have the validation annotations, and everything is in one file. So less files, easier to understand as a developer, and yes, I don't care that this is in command. There is a question in the back.
Hi. My name is Dima. You already answered one of my questions regarding PHP docs. Mm-hmm. So another one, do you prefer using like color type hinting? Because, for example, it's still working a bit strange, especially integer and floating. Even if we enable like strict type, it costs sometimes.
And that's why I did not talk about that, because I'm not sure that we need those kind of type hints in PHP.
Yeah, so how can we like know this integer or float?
Yeah.
If we don't use PHP doc.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's your choice. I'm just saying that I don't want useless PHP docs. So if you are not using type int for integers, then you might need some PHP docs to actually document that you want an integer, but the variable name should probably tell you that this should be an integer or a Boolean anyway. So I'm not even sure that even if you're not using type int, you really need that kind of documentation to say that this is an integer. Or put another way, it might make sense for a framework or a library that you are sharing with the world. It's not really the case for your own code. If it's internal, then you don't really need that kind of documentation. Or I think you don't need that kind of documentation. But I know that you have a lot of money here, so you probably don't care, taking some time to actually add all those PHP docs.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about, I don't know, like merging with another framework like Laravel or something like that, or like cooperating with them?
That's a very good question. Yes, I thought about that more than once, actually. The great thing about Laravel is that they are using Symfony, some of the Symfony components. So we are kind of compatible, right? The big difference, so most of the time I'm talking about a Symfony project. I'm not talking about a Symfony framework. So I think that Symfony is really a project with several different sub-projects. So one of them is the framework, and we are competing with Laravel. And then we have the components. And I think that nowadays the components are much more important than the framework, right? And the components are used by so many PHP libraries that we are really focused on this sub-project, the component. And then if Laravel is successful, that's great.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So merging, I'm not sure if it would make sense because we have a very different approach. The framework, I'm not talking about the components, I'm talking about the frameworks. The frameworks have two different philosophies. And I think both are good, depending on your needs, depending on your own way of doing things, depending on the skills that you have in your team, depending on the size of your team, depending on a lot of different factors. So if you ask me if Laravel is better than Symfony or Symfony better than Laravel, I would tell you that I don't know. It depends. Sometimes I think using Laravel is better than using the Symfony framework, and sometimes I would not use Laravel. I would use Symfony instead. So I'm not sure if it would be a good idea to actually merge the frameworks, because then we would lose one approach. And I think that's not necessarily a good thing. Yeah, but okay, Symfony is a 10-year-old project. 10 years. We're not talking about something that I wrote last week. 10 years. Laravel is 5 years old probably now. Doctrine is 10 years old. So a lot of the core libraries in the PHP world, they are very mature. Very, not old, but mature, right? So it's very different from the JavaScript world.
So can we go back to documentation?
Mm-hmm.
If, I'm assuming Symfony is working on, or is building for multiple code bases, language bases, sorry. How do you manage the documentation for similar processes in different languages?
What do you mean?
Well, if you're writing for, say, C#, Java, PHP, JavaScript, but you have similar library set written across multiple languages, do you include the documentation into the language itself, or do you have it external?
I'm not sure I understand the question. We are only using PHP in Symfony, so we don't have JavaScript, we don't have C#, we don't have anything else. Just plain PHP.
Okay.
Yeah. And in the past, especially in Symfony 1, we had some JavaScript back then. It was a bad idea because it started different. So I don't want to tell you which JavaScript library you need to use. And the thing is, we have a backward compatibility document where we are very strict on what we can do between versions and what we can't do. And if we include a JavaScript library, and if it's not popular anymore in 6 months, we need to maintain that for the next 3 to 5 years. 5 years in the JavaScript world? No way. So that's also why when I started to work on Symfony version 2, I decided to only use PHP and everything related. We have some JavaScript for the web profiler, for instance, but it's internal, and we are not using any library or anything, pure JavaScript to avoid those kind of problems.
Any other questions here? If not, we could try to go.
I got one question. I'm wondering, from your perspective, how getting Symfony into Drupal 8 happened, and how, sort of like a mini retrospective, and how that has affected Symfony at all, if it has. Like, what did Symfony get out of it or learn from it?
That's interesting. So first, I was really proud when they announced that they were going to use Symfony for Drupal 8. Actually, I was on vacation with my wife in Italy, in a very small village, really small one. You don't have those kind of villages here in the US. Without access to the Wi-Fi or any internet, actually. I had a phone call from Sensio Labs, someone saying, wow, you need to connect somewhere because they are talking about Symfony on the Drupal, website, the forum, or whatever, tickets, issues, whatever, and you need to comment there. So I found a way to actually connect to the internet, and I said, wow, if you need help, I'm here, I can help. And it was kind of useful because back then they were evaluating using Symfony or Zen framework or Lithium, or I don't remember, 3 or 4 different frameworks. And the fact that the Symfony community actually tried to help them evaluate Symfony, and we helped them because, Drupal 7 and Symfony are 2 very different projects. So trying to figure out how to use Symfony in a Drupal code base, it's kind of difficult. And for a Drupal developer, trying to understand how Symfony works, it's very complex. And for Symfony developers trying to understand how Drupal 7 works, it is not possible. So we worked together to actually see how we could make that work. And the great thing is, so they decided to use HTTP Foundation. I think it was the first thing. So Larry wanted to find a way to abstract HTTP messages. They decided to use HTTP Foundation. And then Larry called me and he asked me, we have this problem and we don't know how to resolve that. And I told him, yes, just use HTTP kernel. And they decided to use HTTP kernel. And then the next thing was, yeah, well, but we don't know how to do that. And, well, you can use dependency injection and the routing system and Twig. And that's how it worked. So we had a lot of feedback from the Drupal developers. We realized that it is not easy to say no, because obviously Drupal tried to move the project, the Symfony project, in their direction. And most of the time, we thought that it was not the right direction. But of course, Drupal is special, they have special needs, they have a special way of doing things, so it is special for them, and they need this special feature. And it's kind of complex to tell them, well, that doesn't make any sense. you should do it in a different way. So it took a lot of time to actually help them trying to, mix the Drupal philosophy and the Symfony one. And I think they did a great job, really. So the end result, Drupal 8, is really, it's really a great project. Also because I can actually understand what's going on, which is great. It's a great project, and I think we don't imagine. I know because I've been to a lot of meetings with them, with the core team, and a lot of conferences. It was very difficult for them, and honestly, at some point, I thought it would never, ever happen. And it did. So it worked. So that's great. And I think they are moving much faster now. So there was a slowdown, and then they are moving much faster. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting to think about the cultural change and the cultural shift and how it's such a behemoth to move in the way that you think about things. Even like this role here, I think we all work at Chapter 3 and we've been Drupal developers for a long time. And even for us on the inside in the core issue queue, it's hard to move the needle. It's hard to even get on the Richter scale. So I can definitely understand how that cultural shift was a big task, a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and the biggest problem was how to not lose a large part of the community. Because obviously not everyone is able to, PHP is great also as a community because we have a lot of different people in there. So it's not just about developers that are using PHP as, a professional job. It's also about millions of people using PHP without any engineering background. And that's the great thing about PHP, and we don't want to lose that. And Symfony is not, the right project to start with PHP, probably not. And so I think that they were able to find the right balance between trying to adopt some of the Symfony best practices. I'm not saying that those are universal best practices, but some of the Symfony best practices, and keep the Drupal way as well. So I think there is the right balance between the two culture, which is very, very interesting.
Great. One more question. A couple more questions.
So you mentioned that Symfony framework and Laravel framework have different philosophies. I was wondering if you could describe what you see those as well as when you would pick one over the other.
So Symfony is more about the low-level architecture of the website. So it's more about the core components. But then you can build whatever you want. We don't impose anything, which means that if you want to use Redis or Memcached or RabbitMQ or things like that, it's up to you to assemble all the bundles and the libraries that you want to use. And that's great for people who knows what they are doing and they want to use DDD and anything DD. But if you are a younger developer and if you want to have things that are pre-built for you or choices are already made for you, Laravel is better because out of the box you have an ORM. That's not the case with Symfony. You can use Doctrine, and Doctrine works well and great with Symfony. It's not a requirement, right? And then you have queues that are bundled with Laravel by default. It's not the case. You can have some bundles with Symfony doing the same thing, but it's not bundled within the framework. So that's why the philosophies are a bit different. Also, we insist, I'm not sure if it is a good idea, but in being, I would say that, pure, no, forget about that. again, we have some best practices. Our best practices, dependency injection, using a container the right way, so never ever inject a container in a class and things like that. And I think Laravel is less strict in that regard. They have other best practices, not the same. So they're trying to ease the work of the developer. We are trying to make sure that what you develop with Symfony is you can maintain the code base for a long period of time. And you can evolve the code for a long period of time. So if you want to create a small API, a backend for a mobile app, for instance, I think Symfony might be better, but you can do it with Laravel as well. If you are developing a small e-commerce website, you might use Laravel Spark, for instance, which gives you some JavaScript, which gives you the integration with Stripe and everything. You have a backend and things like that, so you can get started really fast. You don't have that in the Symfony world. That's also because we want to focus on the core Symfony components, and we don't want to compete with projects using Symfony. So we don't want to create a CMS, an e-commerce platform on top of Symfony directly, the core team, the Symfony core team, because we have so many other CMSs and e-commerce platforms using Symfony, so we don't want to compete with them. And we think that for the PHP ecosystem, and the PHP ecosystem is going to be much stronger if we can share libraries amongst all those projects instead of having silos. And that was the case 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I'm not sure if that's the case anymore, but you were a Drupal developer, you were a WordPress developer, you were a Symfony developer, right? And there was no communication. And the great thing about Drupal adopting Symfony and then some other projects, all of a sudden, they have one thing in common, some of the Symfony components, which means that there is a collaboration between Easy Publish and Drupal. Two different CMSs written in PHP. They are in competition, of course, but on technical, for some technical features, they are actually collaborating on a Symfony component, the routing one, which is great, right? Because we need to compete with Java and Ruby and Python, not within the PHP world. So the thing I'm the most proud of is the fact that Symfony is used in so many different libraries in the PHP world. So that also explains the philosophy and the difference between Laravel and Symfony.
Great. I think we'll do one more question in the room, and then we'll try for the phone, and then we'll close things out.
So you've mentioned that the users of Composer can already benefit from PHP7. What about Symfony? Can you shed a little light on that? Like, what's the roadmap?
Oh, you can use Symfony is compatible with PHP 7.0 and 7.1. So that's something we are doing. Actually, when trying to make Symfony compatible with PHP 7.1, we found quite a few bugs in PHP 7.1. So actually in my team, I have one of the PHP core team developer, and that helps a lot. So whenever we have a bug in Symfony because of the bug in PHP 7.1, we were able to fix it quickly, which means that Symfony is actually compatible with PHP 7.1 as of PHP 7.1 RC3. Because before, there is a bug, which means that there is a segmentation fault for, I don't remember which component it was. And the great thing about Symfony is that the code base is large. We have a lot of components, the routing, HTTP kernel, but also the process one, which means that we are a very good test suite for a new version of PHP, and we can detect backward incompatible changes. And we found one, the question mark in the type engine thing, there was a backward compatibility issue there, and we were able to fix that before 7.1 release. And that's great because if it was released with the bug, it was backward incompatible, and there was nothing we can do about that. So,
does it mean that that Symfony already uses some of PHP7 features?
No, it means we are compatible. We are not using PHP7 features for one reason, is that we are still compatible with PHP 5.5. So actually, 5.3, depending on the version. So the thing is, we are maintaining a lot of different versions in parallel. So we are maintaining 2.7, 2.8, 3.1, and 3.2 right now. 3.1 and 3.2 need PHP 5.5 plus, but 2.7 and 2.8 need PHP 5.3. So we must be compatible with 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 7, and 7.1.
Well, the question was mostly like, do you expect a new Symfony version that would rely on PHP7 anytime soon?
No, it's not possible. We need to be backward compatible. That's not how it works. So the only way to actually bump the PHP minimal version to PHP7 and then use PHP7 is to bump Symfony to Symfony 4. And we know that Symfony 4 is going to happen in a year from now or 2 years from now, because we know when we are actually going to release all those versions at the end of next year. Yeah, at the end of next year. So probably at the end of next year, PHP 4 is going to be compatible only with PHP 7 plus. This is the first step, but PHP Symfony 4.0 must be compatible with Symfony 3.4, which means that in PHP 4.0 we can't use PHP 7 features, because Symfony 4.0 is exactly the same as Symfony 3.4.
So deprecation.
Exactly. Which means that we will be able to use PHP 7 features as of Symfony 4.1, something like that. This is a lot of work. So just to give you an idea, half of the core team time is spent on backward compatibility. Half of our time. Just being sure that we don't break things. And sometimes we are breaking things. It's a lot of work. A lot of work.
Your line has been unmuted.
Is there anyone people who've dialed in remote? I know you've been on the line for a long time. Is anyone, I just opened up the line so people on the phone who've dialed in can talk. Is there any questions from people dialed in? If no, we can call it a night. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fabien. That was a great presentation.